Today, we're going to be upgrading the HP Envy 17T laptop. Some time ago, we did an unboxing and setup of this laptop. So today what we're going to do is we're going to upgrade the drive that's in here. We're going to go from a spinning drive that's 100 megabytes a second to a SSD that's about 500 to 600 megabytes per second. I wish we could go to an NVMe drive, but you know, it is what it is. Because this laptop was purchased at Costco, this model was made for a specific market, and HP builds different laptops for different markets. Anyway, long story short, the NVMe socket is not there, but we're going to do two things. We're going to reboot this, go into the BIOS. We're looking for number one, USB support, so we can boot from the USB drive. Because of the two things we're doing, we're going to be putting a new drive in. But number two, we're going from Windows 10 Home to Windows 10 Pro. So since we need to do that while we're there, looking for USB support, we're also going to look and see if there's NVMe support. Now, the socket is probably not here, but the first thing we need to do is look in the BIOS. If we don't see BIOS support for something that says something about NVMe, then there will not be a socket. So what we need to do now is boot this thing up, go into the BIOS. We don't need to go into the operating system. We'll just shut it right back down. Now, I will take a moment and say right now, you always want to be sure you have a clone image or backup of whatever you're doing with the drive. Well, because we're pulling the original drive out, that becomes our copy, that becomes our backup. So later we can use an application mover, so all the stuff, special drivers or anything from HP, we'll be able to take all that stuff and move it over to the new drive. And we'll be able to take this old drive, put it in a kit from something like Vantech that's two pieces, one a case, and two the cable that plugs into the drive and plugs into the USB-C port, and give us access to that drive so we can get that stuff back up and get going. So now let's see if we can go up and boot this into the BIOS. You won't be able to see this on the screen, so what we're going to try to do is show you from either overhead, or we'll put another camera on it and show it to you. So I want you to see what the BIOS says. One of the things about most laptops, some laptops have the ability to do dual display where you can change the default display. And I say some, very few. Most laptops always default to the display in front of you, which is your LCD screen. You don't see what comes out of the secondary until we get up into the operating system. So I will not be able to plug this into HDMI and show you that, but I will show you what I can because I want you to see what the BIOS says. So we're going to go through the sequences, and we're also going to follow the instructions according to the manual. We'll switch over to that and follow those instructions. Let's take a look at that. So what we need to do is we're going to be removing the hard drive, and we're going to follow these steps. It's a fairly straightforward process, but first thing we would want to do before we do that is we want to boot the computer, and we're looking for two items. We want to go to the BIOS. So what we're going to need to do is press the escape key, then we'll press F10 to go into the BIOS and see what's going on. Okay, with the power button off, we're going to turn power on, and we want to hold down the escape key, and then we'll press F10. We're going to see a menu up here in the upper left hand corner. I'm going to see if I can get a camera on that and show you. Okay, here's what we want you to see. We've pressed the escape key while the system was booting up. We've got the startup menu. We want to press F10 for BIOS setup. So we're going to do that. We'll press F10. Now we're into the BIOS. We've already shut this thing down once, and because the hibernation file is not there, it's painfully slow. So we're going to press the power button, power off, no power. The next thing we need to do is disconnect everything. With everything disconnected, now we need to close the lid, unplug everything, flip it over. Close the lid. We'll disconnect power. We'll disconnect HDMI, set that aside for later, and we'll disconnect our mouse. From this standpoint, with the laptop facing us, we're going to close the lid. We're going to flip it over. Hinges are here in the back. We'll flip it over, end to end. And here's where it gets interesting. We've got these screws to remove. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've got to remove this rear foot. And the other screws, there should be about 2 right in here. Then what we'll need to do is pry this lid up once the back is off. To get to the hard drive, we need to disconnect the battery. So follow the instructions, remove the bottom cover, and we'll see where the battery's at. We just need to disconnect the battery, that connector right there. We need to disconnect that, and hopefully we won't have to pull the battery out. So to disassemble, turn off the computer, make sure it's not in hibernation mode. That hibernation file is a big deal. It lets that system boot up a whole lot faster. Without it, it is painfully slow. I mean, it's like you just as soon to, you know, like scratching on a chalkboard. Anyway, I'm just saying. So with this set up, let's start Now we're going to need a set of screwdrivers, of which I have had, and they always did what I needed. But when I got ready to do this, I didn't have what I needed. The manual said we needed a Torx T4. These are tiny little screws, so we had to get one for it. And the ones we have are from the laptops we worked on many, many years ago when we were working on compact. We haven't worked on a compact laptop in eons. So anyway, we had to get special screwdrivers for this HP. Now the screwdrivers we're going to be using, we had a set, WIHA. These will also be easy to read, so when I do an overhead shot, I can show you what that looks like. And I'm also going to suit up, so I'll have my gloves on, and I'll have my anti-static strap. We're concerned about ESD, electrostatic discharge. We've got a full set, a full complement of screwdrivers, and the one size we're looking for, these will be easy to read on this screen. T1, T2, T3, T4. So we'll take all the rest of those and set them aside until we need them again. Okay, so we need to take all these out. First thing we'll do is we'll start with a strip, pulling that out. A pair of pliers is a good idea for pulling that with. It'll just come right out. Picked it out with my fingers, so we can lay that aside. Now the sticky that was onto it is still there, so we've got to pick that out. So to get that back together, we'll have to get probably a new strip, unless we can fix this. And that comes out. So now we've got 3 screws here we can get to. So we should be able to get to all the screws. Okay, we've got the rear rubber foot out and the strip that had the tacky on it, so we could expose those 3 screws. So we got to get that out. Okay, remove the rear rubber foot strip. We've done. The rear rubber foot strip is included in the rubber kits, and there's a spare part number. Okay, all those they claim are Torx 5 M.2 screws. Well, we've got a T5. We'll try the T4. That is a T4. So that's a T4, not a T5. We want to take all these screws and set them aside. It would be a good idea if you've got a little parts tray, pill bottle cover, something. You can put those in because you want to make note of the length of those screws as you take them out so you've got some place to keep them. So far the first 2, this one and this one are the same length. We'll go down here and try this one and see what we've got. But for anybody that's wondering, for this particular model, for the HP Envy 17T, yep, these are short. This is a T4. So there needs to be a little bit of work done, I guess, on that manual when they say use a Torx 5. These are actually a Torx 4. Now these across the front are shorter, so that'll be fairly easy and straightforward to figure out. I expect the ones across the rear will be short like that as well. What about you guys? This is kind of exciting because this has been a great laptop, but you know, after using a faster drive like an NVMe on the desktops and other laptops, that's the only way to go. We can't go that fast, but we're going to breathe new life into this computer by putting an SSD in it from 100 megabytes to 500 or 600 megabytes. We can't go 3,500 megabytes, but we're going to look, we'll see. We can do this. We're going to be happy with it. Another screw here on top. That's a longer one. So the ones across the front are the short ones. These 2 here and this one on the side, which will be this one as well, are longer. I've got them over here to the side. I'm keeping them just out of the way, but still within view so that they will be close. Now I can tell those longer screws also had some Loctite. That looks like blue Loctite to set them, which was a good idea. Now we've got these 3 here to get out. These will probably be shorties. We'll see. Oh wow, those 3 in there are Phillips. Surprise, surprise. So that would be a micro screwdriver. Okay, those 3 have been loosened. Now what we want to do is pry this loose from right up in here. So we're going to look at our prying tools. I'm going to start with a pick, like a guitar pick. We'll put a link up to some of these parts and things we're using, so that way if you want to do this yourself, you'll be able to get hold of some of these items. I want to keep it something thin and something that will not leave a mark. It's like a guitar pick, but it's kind of modified. In other words, it's thick, but it's got thin edges. I'll lay that down and show you. You can get an idea what that looks like. As you can see the edges of this, as I pick this up, it gives you some idea. I've got something really thin to work with that I can use as a wedge. And I've got that on 3 edges, depending on any one I use. So if one gives out, I got 2 more. That should come in handy. Okay, we want to kick this up, get right up in there, pry that loose. Run that all the way down. That should help separate that. Okay, that sounds like that's coming loose. Okay, that little tool come in handy. So, now there's 3 screws still in this, so as we pry this loose, we're popping it up toward us, and that comes loose. So now we should be able to just set this aside. Now that we've got the back off, it's time to suit up. Anti-static gloves, we get an idea where everything's at. I can see where the memory is, the DVD. I can see the drive now. Good layout. If you notice the memory here is on the left, these two sockets. Here's our fan, still looks pretty clean. Here's our external DVD. Here's the battery. We've got to disconnect power to the battery, which should be right there. Right there. We've got to disconnect power to the battery, and right there's our drive. So we're going to disconnect that spinning drive, and we're going to put in an SSD. This has a 1 terabyte drive in it. According to the specs, it's supposed to be 5400 RPM. I say the specs from HP, but according to the information we found, because we ran Belarc Advisor, it says it's a 7200 RPM drive. Belarc Advisor says that, and so does the documentation from Costco. So anyway, it's an HGST. We're going to pull that drive out, which is now owned by Western Digital. We're going to pull that drive out, reuse everything around it, and we're going to put in a brand new drive, which will be a Samsung 860 EVO SSD, 1 terabyte. And everything's still factory sealed. So first thing, disconnect the battery right here. So we need to pull that connector gingerly. Battery is disconnected. Now we need to go after the drive according to the instructions with the back off, hard drive. We've turned off the computer. We've disconnected the back. We've disconnected power, and we've disconnected all external devices with the bottom cover off and the battery cable disconnected. We're now ready to tackle the drive. So to remove the drive, release the zero insertion force, the ZIF socket connector to which the hard drive cable is connected, and then disconnect the hard drive cable from the board. So this connector right here, right there, we want to disconnect this connector right here. So we'll disconnect that. A little tab on top we can pull. Okay, that's disconnected using that little plastic tab on top. We have that part off. There's the tab. So number one, this is disconnected. Number two, this needs to be disconnected. And everything's got a tag on it. And then that drive just pops right out. So we've got this little rubber jacket on. So we need to remove this connector right here. Set that down. I need to remove this jacket. So the next thing we need to do is get our drive open. So we've got our Samsung. We'll open that up. Grounded, gloves, and there's our SSD. So all we need to do is repeat it. So I flipped it upside down, and if you'll notice, all I need to do is take this little jacket off of there, put it on here. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. That's now got the little jacket that holds it in. So we need to take the connector, plug it in, same orientation, nothing's changed. Clips right in. So now we just need to insert this right back in that little compartment, and it just sits there press fit. And we need to take this little connector here and get that reattached. And the procedure in the manual is pretty straightforward. There's the little rubber jacket right here. There's the data cable. There's the data cable right there. We've got to connect it. We've already got to connect it here to the drive. We got the drive back in the mount, so we just need to connect it to this little connector right here. Now I'm using a straight blade screwdriver to push that in. It didn't take a whole lot of force. It took more force to get it out than it did to put it on. We should be good to go. Let's see. Now all we need to do is take the original drive, set it aside, because we're going to put it in this other device so we can have access to it later. So we'll just set it over there for the time being. So now what we want to do is get our back put back on here. So we'll get this laid down flat, see how we do. Oh, got to remember, we got to reconnect the battery first, which would be this connector right here. So let's reconnect that. And again, that connector goes in easier than it came out. If we've done our homework right, we should be good to go. So we'll get this laid back down. The only thing we're going to have trouble putting back on will be the foot on the back, because a little rubber gasket that goes on that holds that in there, when I pulled it up, it lost its sticky. I don't expect it to go back down easily, so we may have to get a new kit with some stickum to put that back on. We'll see. So let's get the back on. So we've got the drive installed. We'll put the back on. We're watching the seam as we go down. We hear it snap, and that should clip right back in. Okay, front edge looks good. Sides look good. We have a good margin. There we go. Got that tapped back down. That needs just a little bit of a snap. Everything here on the back looks good. Let's see here. Another little snap. So that's a good margin. So the edges are good all the way around, so we should be good now for screws. And remember, those 3 Phillips screws that are right in here are still there. We didn't take those out. So we'll attach those first, reverse the order. So far so good. A Phillips micro screwdriver, and I'm holding down the back just a little bit of pressure to make sure we make contact. And we'll reverse the order on the screws. Remember, the long ones on the side, short ones across here. And these go back to our T4, which anyway, now I've got two T4s. It said it needed a T5, so I'll start with these shorties in front. One. You want to be careful and keep a good grip on these because these are tiny little screws. If you were to drop them, man, that would be fun. Not. So we'll get these screws back in. 1, 2. I'm a firm believer in Torx, but I got to tell you that's the smallest Torx I think I've ever used. Now I've got a set of screwdrivers that go all the way down to Torx T1. I didn't know. Now I do. Learn something new every day. Can't imagine the screws that would go on, but I got it if I need it. So we'll get all these little ones in first. Then we'll do the two side ones. Now I've already taken the liberty of downloading Windows 10 onto a USB stick. So all I need to do is plug it in and do our thing. This will breathe new life into this laptop. It's been a great laptop. Recently had a subscriber ask me if this would be good to do CAD with. You know, it's a great laptop for doing regular stuff, but I wouldn't get this for CAD because you want something that's got more cores. I'd get something that's got at least 6 cores. This is a 4-core, 8-thread. I would look at something with at least, well, you might look at an Asus, something that's also got some better graphics, because if you're going to do CAD, you want to be able to possibly do some rendering. I wouldn't render with this. This is just regular stuff kind of laptop. I like the size of the screen. I like the fact that I've got a burner on here. I still do some stuff with the burner. Comes in handy. I don't do as much as I used to, but I still do. And I still put those on the desktop machines for lots of reasons. We've got 3 side screws. Okay, we had 2 long screws here and 2 long screws here. These 1, 2, 3, 4 in front were all short screws. And these 3 screws here were all Phillips. I think the trickiest part was probably getting the back off, and using this little device that kind of looked like a guitar pick was crucial. It was key for that. I wanted to use something that wouldn't mar up the plastic or make a mess of things. And I've got a kit here. Again, I'll put a link up to all these parts so you'll know what we used. And as far as what SSD to use, the SSD that we chose to use, Samsung, I'm just partial to Samsung, but the one we got was we thought bang for the buck at the time. Check your prices. See what works for you. There was a 1 terabyte drive in here, so we want to keep a 1 terabyte drive. Now the other laptops we're going to be working on, and we will do those in some upcoming videos, those probably have like a 512 in them, NVMe drive, and we will upgrade those to 1 terabyte NVMe drives. 512 in a laptop is kind of slim, in my opinion. 1 terabyte's perfect. But when you're initially buying the laptop, getting the configuration that gives you the best bang for the buck, 512 is fine to start with. You're good for a year. Then when you get ready to upgrade, get a 1 terabyte. And then whether you buy a PCI Express 3 or PCI Express 4 drive, get the one that's best bang for the buck because it's backwards compatible. Remember, this is all PCI Express 3, but we have PCI Express 4 drives out, and we have PCI Express 4 version 2 drives coming out soon. So look what's best bang for the buck. Prices fluctuate. I'm just making sure these screws are secure, kind of like lug nuts on a tire. I'm just going around checking them. Okay, one last thing would be the sticky stuff that held the foot down. I don't expect that to go back in the way it came out because I had a time getting it out. So instead of making a mess of things, I'll just wait and I'll get a new kit that has this rear foot with the sticky stuff on it. Now I can stick that in there and it sits there, but that little foot is not going to stay. It'll come right back out. And I could stick some goop in there, some goo that would stick to that and hold it. But I'm going to keep it according to manufacturer's specs, and I'll get a new one of those little pieces of tape. I'll look and see what the kit is. For that, I'll also put up a link in the video for those of you that, you know, you're free to do what you'd like. So we've got the thing back together. We're going to flip it over now, and let's power it up and see what we got. So we can look at it with the overhead camera, and that way you can see what's going on the screen. And I can't flip the screen all the way up because it has a stop spot on it. Now we're going to plug in power. We're going to plug in the mouse, but we will not plug in the network. The reason for that is we're going to create an offline account. When you install Windows, you can have an online account or an offline account. Won't go into the details about that. We have before in other videos with the other laptops. I'll just say we're going to do an offline account, which is what you normally get when you open up a laptop. So we plug in power. I'm going to plug in the external mouse. It's just a little easier for me to get around, especially with this until we get all the drivers installed. Windows 10 will do its thing. Once Windows Pro is on here, we'll bypass some of the screens. And once we get to the point we can plug in HDMI, I'll flip it over and show you what's going on. So first thing's power. Next thing will be our mouse. Now for now, I'm going to go ahead and plug in HDMI, and it'll be ready when we're ready, once Windows comes up. So those 3 connections. Now there's a light here on this side. If you can see it, it shows power. It's an amber looking light, turned red, so it shows we got power. It looked amber, now it looks red. So anyway, we got power plugged in. So we're going to open up the lid. We'll be watching this power button when it comes on. We also want to get our thumb drive ready so we can do our install. And for those of you not familiar, you can download the Windows 10 ISO either to a USB thumb drive or to a DVD. This is faster, but we'll put a link up so you can figure out how to do that. And you need a working computer to make that happen, so just saying. Plug that in. Next step, let's power up. And as we power up, the process should automatically do the install and should just do what it needs to do. So let's see how this goes. Okay, the CMOS checksum is invalid. The CMOS will be reset to the default configuration and will be rebooted. Please check your BIOS setup options to see if they have changed. So we're going to enter the system to reboot. It did that automatically. Let's see if it will install Windows automatically. Okay, we see the HP logo coming up, and we do. Fantastic. Now, we don't have anything out on HDMI yet, so all I can do is go through the setup process. I'm trying to figure the best place for me to get so you can see what you need to see without seeing me. Sorry for the reflection. Okay, so we have to use the keyboard, press enter for next. There's the mouse, we'll click on next, and we will do an install now. Setup is starting. Good old EULA, we got to answer that. Next. We're not doing an upgrade, we're doing a clean new install. Now it's going to see the drive and it'll do what it needs to. All we have to do is click on next. It will format the drive according to what it needs to do. We couldn't find any drives to get a storage driver. We're going to have to go back to the BIOS. It couldn't see the drive. Okay, let's power down. We got to get into the BIOS. Press escape. I'll show you what I'm doing as soon as I get to a point where I can. Okay, we're going to BIOS setup. We're going to do F10 and we will tab over to system configuration. We'll tab down to our boot options. Press enter. It shows CD-ROM boot and apparently it doesn't see the disk. OS boot manager, internal, USB network. Legacy boot order, notebook hard drives. We need boot options. Something's not making connection. So we're going to have to power down and go through that again. Okay. We get to do that over. Disconnect, disconnect, disconnect. See what we're missing. Take it apart again. Okay, let's do this again. See what's wrong. Long screw, long screw, long screw, long screw. Now the 4 short ones. Guitar pick. Up. Got to get our Phillips screw drives. We got to get our Phillips screws out. So 1, 2. You'll hear them when they back out, when they're topped out. So let's pry this open again. Put our tool in here. Okay, set that aside. See what we're missing. The drive is incorrect. We'll drop it back down. Something you want to pay close attention to. This little connector right here has a little, that'll flip up. Once this connector's in, you want to make sure that's down and closed right there. Let's see if we've got everything. See how far we get this time. See if we make any progress. Plug in our USB again. Power up. We're going to get into the BIOS. Okay, Windows is going ahead and installing again. Let's see if we're getting an install now. Now what we're going to do is say, I don't have a product key. We'll put that in later. We just want to get Windows installed right now. So you make sure that connector's in there good. So we're going to pick Windows 10 Pro and click Next. Go to the EULA, click Next. Now, which type of installation do you want? We're not doing an upgrade. We're doing a custom install because this is a clean install. It sees the drive, so we're in business. We got our connection this time. So all we have to do is click on Next and it'll format the drive accordingly. It'll set all the partitions up. And now from this point on, we're just installing Windows. Pretty straightforward. This part shouldn't take too long. And again, because we don't have a network connection, we're creating a offline account. So what I had to do is I took the back off. Apparently my connection on the drive was not secure. There's a little flap that comes down. So you want to be sure and check that. If for some reason your drive doesn't connect, go back and do it again. You'll be in good shape. So now we're getting Windows installed. This should be pretty simple and pretty straightforward. And when we get finished, I'll shut this down, finish putting the screws into it. So now what we're doing, we're taking this laptop and we're doing 2 things. Windows cannot install required files. Make sure all files required for installation are available. Well, they're there. They're on the memory stick. So on this side, we have 2 USB ports. This is the first one. That must be USB 2. We're going to try the second one. If we get the same error here, then we're going to try this port over here where we've had the mouse plugged in. And we'll unplug the mouse and put it on the opposite side. This is progress. So we'll pull that out, try the second one, see if we get the same error. Little details they don't tell you about. Operation was canceled. I'll just shut it down. We'll start the process over. That's good to know. So when you're installing Windows, Windows needs to be installed from a USB 3 port. If this is a USB 2 port, that's where we're getting this error from. We'll see. So we're in the second port. Let's see how far we get. So install Windows. Setup is starting. Don't have a product key. Windows setup. We'll pick Windows 10 Pro. Next. The EULA. Next. Custom install. We'll go through just to be safe and get rid of all these partitions. And let Windows recreate them. Okay, unallocated space. So now that's what we want. We'll click Next. Windows is copying files. We'll see how far we get. Remember, we've got to have a USB 3 port. And if we're in USB 2, that's what's causing us grief. All these little subtle nuances. It's like, how big of a disk can you use to create a Windows 10 installation? 16 gigs is perfect. Because you have to remember that drive is not formatted in TFS. It's formatted for FAT32. So it's got to go through that old technology process to get up and running. It's got to get off the crutch before it can walk. So we'll see how far we get this time. So again, we're in the second port. The first port, no good. Second port, so far so good. Getting ready for installation, we're at 92%. So we'll see what happens. 100%, installing features. Interesting. So let's remember that top port must be a USB 2 port. That second port is USB 3. And Windows is going to restart now. This is like watching paint dry or grass grow. It is what it is. Okay, laptop's coming back up. We see the logo. This time we're making progress. All because of a port. Getting ready, starting devices. Okay, we're making progress. See if I can throw that on the screen. I'll tilt that so you can see it. Okay, we see the HP logo, and we see the, there we are, Windows coming up. We don't have external display yet, but when we do, I'll flip over to it. That's the only tough thing about some of the stuff we do with laptops as opposed to a desktop. Okay, we picked the country, United States, so I'm going to hit enter. Nothing I can do about the shadow. Is the keyboard layout good? We're going to say yes. We'll click next. Want to add a second keyboard? We're going to say skip. It wants to get connected. We're going to say nope. Right down here on the bottom left, I don't have internet. It'll say just a moment. It's still trying to get me to create an internet connection, so I'm going to say continue down here on the bottom left. Continue with limited setup because we're creating an offline account. For those of you that want to do an online account, that's a matter of choice. Now all I do is put in the username. Who's going to use this PC? That would be me. I'm not putting in a password. Passwords are easy to knock out, but for those of you that need to use a password, it's a good idea. But I don't use passwords. I network a lot of computers that do a lot of stuff. And if I can hack it, what's the point? But this does not go out on a public network. So these are all default settings. We're just going to go ahead and say OK. We can come back and change these later. I don't have a problem with that. So we'll click enter. Do more across devices with active history. I'm going to say no. Oh, the tablet's already got a driver. Impressive. So I'm going to say no. Let Cortana. Nope. Not now. And as Windows comes up, we're getting everything ready for you. This might take several minutes. Don't turn off your computer. Amen to that. So while this is getting set up, we're going to have an offline account, which is what we want. That's the way we run our computers. We can maintain our network security within. We use this laptop mainly for controlling the video switch. We have a Blackmagic ATEM 4K video switch, so it does perfect for what we need. And saving the configurations for whatever we do special with the video switch, this laptop is great. But if you've got one of these and you want to upgrade it, this is the smart way to upgrade it to add more life to it. Otherwise, that spinning hard drive is just the only thing we use spinning hard drives now, which are extremely large, 8, 10 terabyte. They go up, I think, to 18 terabyte now or 20 terabyte. The only thing we use those for is offline storage for video, which, video takes a lot of space. But even at 1080, you got to have some place to put it. So once we do our processing, it offloads to that. So almost there, and we now have Windows up. It did not detect the HDMI out, so we don't have the correct driver. So once we get the correct driver installed for the display, then we'll be able to see externally where I can plug it in, put it up on the switch where you can see it instead of having me kick it sideways and you get a reflection. But we have Windows up and running. I'll show you. So we've done two things with the laptop. One, we've installed an SSD, and two, we've gone from Windows 10 Home to Windows 10 Pro. Hope you enjoyed this, folks. I want to thank you for watching. We're going to be doing some more stuff with laptops. Probably the next video about laptops, maybe something about if you're thinking about buying a laptop, because I had some stuff come through from Nick Streeter, and he mentioned about his laptop. He's not interested in building or buying. Remember last time Nick said that, kicking and screaming? He did both. So he said Ed Hansen has a laptop that's older than his. Now, the laptop that Nick Streeter has, that's the laptop that we judge all laptops by. It's an Asus, and that was a mighty fine laptop. I was so busy telling everybody about it, by the time it came around to get one, I missed out on the opportunity. But that's my favorite laptop like Nick Streeter has, so we use that as our standard. So I'm going to talk to Ed Hansen about what he thinks he needs for a laptop, because it's always, you know, well, that's a whole nother story in another video. So I hope you'll stay with us. Thanks for watching. We look forward to seeing you in the next video. Just one by the way, once we plug this into the network and let Windows do the updates, it should see the display driver, and then in which case we'll be able to go out to the monitor so we can throw it up on the switch so you can see what's on the screen. I haven't done that yet. I just wanted to create the offline account, which we've done. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video. That's a wrap.